And we're back for another Cowboys and Coffee episode. I'm here, Paul. I'm the Rev. I'm here, your host, with my co-host, D. What's going on, D? How's everything?
Everything's fine. Enjoyed yesterday's day off, moving you into that awesome apartment.
It's nice to settle in. We're back second year in a row with our guest, RJ Ochoa from SB Nation, from Blogging the Boys. RJ, thanks for coming back, man. We always like having you on. I love interacting
Absolutely.
on Twitter with you. We appreciate having you here and coming on and sharing your time with us.
Of course. Thanks for having me. I hope the move went well. I hope everybody's recovered and that you're enjoying your new home. It's always a fun activity that isn't fun at all. It's like the longest month of your life when you're starting in the process.
Someone called me up during the middle of my move yesterday and talked to me, and like, fine, okay, I'm a minister, so that's part of the gig, right? You get the phone calls, and they ended the phone call with like, all right, have fun today. It's like, buddy, I'm sweating on the back of a truck right now. It's 85 and humid. This is not fun. It's fun now that it's over, but I'm glad it's over. I'm glad I'm settled in and I've been unboxing stuff. But you know what? We're not here to talk about moving. We're here to sip on some coffee. I mean, it's a little late. I had my coffee definitely earlier in the day here on the East Coast. But we're here to talk about Cowboys football. And we're here again post-draft. The Cowboys have already had some rookie mini camps go on. We're just about to come back to Oxnard and get going. What's your overall feeling, RJ, of the Cowboys draft and free agent signings this year? And then I want you to compare that to your feelings last year and how that went. So start me off with what's your opinion now post-draft?
Well, I've said this, we're recording in the final days of June. And something I said at the beginning of this month on some show was that I know this is a weird way to put this, but this is the most optimism I've had about the Cowboys in a June in a really long time. Now, they don't hand out Lombardi trophies in June, right? Like they don't hand out even like NFC East championship caps in June. But you referenced last year. I mean, I'm a Christian man, but that was tested this time a year ago, if I'm being quite honest, with the way the Cowboys chose to handle things. And so it does feel like night and day. I know in my brain, the logical part of me, it isn't that dramatic. They weren't one way that, a year ago and just decided to be the opposite end of the spectrum this particular year, but things just kind of broke that way. And I think it's refreshing to see, the team act in a way that makes, the random Twitter timeline happy. It's refreshing to see them kind of operate as if they are close, as if, they can just make a move or two and be kind of right there. And it feels like they're better. I mean, at this point a year ago, to really totally reflect, I felt like they were a worse team than that had lost to the 49ers at AT&T Stadium. And on the flip side of that, I feel like they're a better team than the one that lost to the 49ers, albeit at Levi Stadium, not where the sun shines at the worst possible time of the day on a random Sunday afternoon. But so, yeah, I mean, I'm quite pleased, if I'm being honest now. I think we're all conditioned to kind of know that there's a trap door if you're a Cowboys fan. And the moment you start to feel really good and really solid, that things are going to fall apart. But right now, it's really difficult to be upset, to be mad, to point any fingers, to feel like they didn't address this, that, or the other. I mean, they really came into class with their homework done, and it's test time. They have their cheat sheet and they're ready to go. And so, will they win the Super Bowl? I don't know. Probably not. The odds are literally stacked against that. But they've set themselves up for a really great chance to do so. And for that, I'm grateful.
So, D, I want to go over to you. Part of this draft is the trading of two late round picks, or a couple of late round picks, for Gilmore and Cooks. D, which one to you has a greater impact, or do you think will have a greater impact this year? Gilmore as corner number one, corner number two, or Cooks as that wide receiver number two, the offense?
Does he have a ring?
He does not.
No.
He came close.
And it's Gilmore.
Yeah.
Gilmore, the one that has the ring. That's the one makes the difference. He has a ring. He should bring it in that locker room every chance he gets and let everybody sees it and go for it. So it's the one with the ring. That's the final ingredient to raise that Lombardi trophy.
It wasn't that long ago that he was Defensive Player of the Year. He wasn't just like a Pro Bowl alternate or even just a Pro Bowl caliber cornerback. He was voted the best defensive player in the NFL. Statistically, PFF still has him as rated one of the best man-to-man corners the last couple of years in the NFL, which now it's a pick your poison. Okay, you go with Diggs, and he can maybe afford to take the chances that he usually takes because you're going to have some riskier throws over to him. You can't just pick on Anthony Brown. God bless him. I think he's odd man out this year. But I think that's definitely. I like Cooks sliding in as the number 2. I actually think, oddly enough, that Cooks is the difference maker more than Gilmore, though, because I think now you have a legitimate number 2 receiver. When Pollard went down in the playoffs last year, it was CeeDee Lamb and might as well have been either one of the 3 of us as the second best offensive weapon because Gallup just wasn't at that level. I think he can. He says he's healthier than he was now. RJ, I'll kick to you. Bigger pickup, Cooks or Gilmore?
I think that Cooks raises the floor of things more in his room. And so you can argue that that's a more seismic thing. I think Gilmore's probably a better player, but obviously they provide different things. And I particularly love the Cooks move because, that was the biggest waving of a white flag the Cowboys front office has made in a long time, right? Like, around Christmas time, they messed around, they flirted with whatever you want to call it, Odell Beckham Jr. They brought in T.Y. Hilton, and that was a bit of an admission of guilt, a bit of an admission of, hey, maybe Amari Cooper was kind of good, maybe we were wrong. And so the Cooks thing is, I don't know that it's fully rectified that wrong for me, but at the very least they seem aware of that, and so I give them a lot of credit for that. It's not easy to atone, and so they did, but I do think, it's awesome that this is a question for our favorite team. We can debate who's the better awesome football player on our favorite team, Brandon Cooks or Stephon Gilmore? But I was personally a little bit shocked when right after the Cowboys traded for Gilmore, because that move happened first. The way that Micah Parsons and Trayvon Diggs and everybody, freaked out. And I'm certainly not, out to disrespect Stephon Gilmore, but I didn't realize he was like the guy. I didn't realize that he was this true elder statesman that like the whole NFL world looked up to. So I do think there's value to that. I do think there's value to, hey, this dude has been there. He's done that. He's won a lot of things, that we're all kind of aiming for. When the Cowboys first signed Gerald McCoy at the beginning of the McCarthy era 3 years ago, at the time, I likened that to McCarthy's Packers bringing in Charles Woodson. Now, Woodson had not won a Super Bowl at the time that he joined the Packers, but he was this dude who had some NFL scars, so to speak. And so I think that's valuable. This is a really young team, and I think a group that when they get to the divisional round are still a little bit kind of shell-shocked. They might be the mighty Dallas Cowboys the way we look at them, and we see the uniform and the logo on the sides of their helmet, and all of our memories kind of come rushing back. But to them, they're still a bunch of kids. I know that Dak's turning 30 in a few weeks' time now, but they are still relatively raw. And so to get somebody like that is a really impactful thing. But that being said, Brandon Cooks hasn't won one, but he's been to 2. And one of the ones that he lost, that Gilmore lost, you could argue if he doesn't leave that game with a concussion, they might win it. And the Eagles might not have ever won one, which would be a world I'd rather live in personally. But yeah, they've got a lot of, experience, a lot of kind of mileage, a lot of tread worn off of those tires that I think will be important in the locker room.
It's important for me to see that Gilmore is not just successful in the Bill Belichick system, but after he left. Look at someone like Asante Samuel, who was an excellent cornerback. He goes to the Eagles, not nearly as good of a cornerback. And they have a lot of players who, when they come out of that system, just don't play at the same level. Tom Brady obviously excluded, right? To Rob Gronkowski. These guys are different beasts. But defensively, he goes to the Colts. He's still a good player. D, you talk about the youth of the Cowboys a lot as their strength. Where do you think that those young players can take the next step this year? Or was there a position group or certain guys who say they're younger and they're ready to propel the Cowboys going forward?
Well, I think you look at the linebackers. Obviously, Parsons is, if you want to call him a linebacker / DN, but I think the linebackers coming in here are going to be outstanding. I think they're gonna play the run. They know the keys to get up there, the line of scrimmage. Now you got D tackles, so I think those linebackers are gonna come through. Mr. Cox has a year to recover from that knee. You got the Clark, you got others. They will be ready. So the linebackers will continue the process of taking the double next step.
I'm intrigued. This might be the deepest Cowboys linebacking team we've had in 15 years, since Parcells was picking guys. It's been a long time, and I'm so happy that it seems like the Cowboys front office is learning. It feels like that moment in Jurassic Park where they're like, she's learning. Like, it's just like a moment of like the Cowboys drafted defensive tackle in the first round, who's not just a good run stuffer, but an elite athlete. Right, these positions which we've kind of overlooked it, and we've added replacement level players or guys past their prime. You're like, this is smart. We're trading 5th round picks for talented players we could fit on a roster, and I'm just blown away because this is what the Cowboys have not done. What we've been begging them to do for the better part of a decade, to put them over the top. I'm impressed, and I think that's what gives me a little more. I think Mike McCarthy has earned the benefit of the doubt. He took the year off football, said he was going to learn. The Cowboys have year after year said, okay, these are our mistakes. We're going to better them, whether it's the defense. And now it looks like they're addressing the analytics department, which I'm very interested to see. This year's draft, after Mozzie Smith, okay, round 1, okay, we hope Mozzie comes in and plays well. RJ, D, I'm going to kick to you first, D, on this one. Which person picked after the first round? I'm going to say there's Schoonmaker, the tight end, Overshown, the linebacker. There's Fehoko, who's edge/D tackle, Eric Scott Jr., Deuce Vaughn, and Jalen Brooks, wide receiver, who I don't think has a roster spot at the moment. But out of those 6 guys, who's the one who you're like, he's going to actually take some snaps and he's going to play well this year?
I don't know where to get Deuce Vaughn on the field, but I think his size, you overlook his size because he's a playmaker. He makes plays. I'm rooting for him. Now, how he gets on the field, the 3rd down back, I know Jones is there. Pollard, they're not going to give him heavy carries, Pollard, but somewhere along the line, I'd like to that running back Vaughn.
Okay. Hey,
yeah,
I like. There's something about guys who have the it factor. I feel like Deuce Vaughn has that it factor where he has, yes, we say Darren Sproles because he's small and he was great, but yeah, he does. Certain players pop in a football game. They're just good football players, and Deuce Vaughn strikes me as a good football player. RJ, what guy passed Mozzie Smith this year? Like, that's a guy I'd keep an eye out for. He could be taking snaps, especially down stretch.
I mean, I know that he is probably the least popular pick, wherever you look. But I mean, if I'm looking at the path of least resistance, right, like the road that each player has to get on the field. I mean, I'm obviously a big fan of Deuce Vaughn, and everybody loves his story. But okay, it's difficult, right, to find a spot for him on the field. The easiest one to me, easiest path is Luke Schoonmaker. I mean, I recognize that there's a lot of hype and belief and potential trust in Jake Ferguson. But I mean, Jake Ferguson had like 18 catches last year. I mean, he had like 26 targets. I mean, we're really, use the phrase benefit of the doubt with Mike McCarthy. I feel like we're really affording Jake Ferguson this benefit of the doubt. And just because Luke Schoonmaker wasn't a 1st round pick doesn't mean he was a 6th round pick. Like, they took him in the 2nd round. I mean, they really, really value him clearly. And I mean, so to me, he has the marriage of opportunity is there, investment is there. It's always, I think, wise to kind of follow how much the team has invested in this player. I recognize that it's rare for rookie tight ends to kind of make an impact, but Dak Prescott has always been productive with his tight ends, regardless of who they are, which is why I think the Cowboys were so comfortable with letting Dalton Schultz walk. And so if I had to bet, right, if I had, 5 million imaginary jelly beans right now, and I had to put them on one player, I like the odds on Luke Schoonmaker the most.
Yeah, I know Jake Ferguson's statistics, some of his percentages, like for tight ends last year, number 1 in separation percentage, number 1 in separation percentage versus single coverage, number 2 in yards after catch, number 6 in yards per route. Like, people look at that and say, okay, small sample size, but let's see what he does with some more reps. Dalton Schultz doesn't have, to me, the athleticism of Schoonmaker or Ferguson or even really Hendershot, to be honest with you. I could definitely see Schoonmaker being the guy to say, okay, he's the one. He's going to take that. He's going to take the reps and the availability and run with it. So, pardon the expression. I would say, if I'm going to pick someone, Eric Scott Jr. has started to raise eyebrows apparently at camp. they keep talking about him. Now, part of it is some of those older cornerbacks are just taking their time, and he's getting some run. But when you have guys like Dan Quinn saying, "I like that he's got that dog in him," when he has the opportunity, he steps up and he goes after it. They seem to have the ability to pick cornerbacks like they did with Deron Bland last year, and they seem to have figured it out, or at least have figured out exactly what they're looking for a Dan Quinn defensive back, whether it's safety or cornerback at this point. And if he gets a shot, I don't think there's snaps for Anthony Brown anymore. We have Jordan Lewis, you have Bland, you obviously have Diggs, you have Gilmore. Are you keeping 6 cornerbacks on this roster? I don't think you are. And I don't think you are. I know Anthony Brown's not a huge cap hit, but he's enough where he's being paid more than a 6th-round pick, and they might go with that 6th-round pick.
Yeah, I mean, Eric Scott is I think a really interesting name. He's obviously had opportunities as of late, with Gilmore kind of getting some veteran rest, with Trayvon kind of in that mix now and being absent from things, albeit obviously not for contractual reasons, but it's an interesting class. I know it doesn't have the appeal that Philly's, Georgia Bulldog double national championship class does and everything like that. But that's kind of, as somebody who's I need the Cowboys to be interesting to put bread on my table. It's been kind of frustrating how over the, throughout the Mike McCarthy era, they've become kind of boring. I mean, they've just become kind of boring and methodical and consistently good without, really doing these, ostentatious things. He's making me work harder, which I'm not a fan of.
Listen, I think the last couple of years they've shown they know what they're looking for, and that's given me hope to say, okay, they're doing a good job. I think they've earned, like I said, the benefit of the doubt that this year, okay, this is what I'm looking for. I want to look back at last year's draft class. Tyler Smith, Sam Williams, they have definitely improved as the year went on. They show stuff. Jalen Tolbert, we have to see. Not much the first year, not really anything. Ferguson, he's shown a lot in his limited reps. Well, let's go. We'll see. But they got Deron Bland, Damone Clark, and even Devin Harper as a depth piece. How good is that draft class looking right now? Because that looks really good to me. That looks like one of the better recent draft classes for the Cowboys. Now, that's dependent on Tyler Smith taking the next step, either at left guard or left tackle. Sam Williams taking that next step at defensive end. Can he become a double-digit sack guy? Where does Clark go? Does Bland follow up another 5, or even if it's not 5 interceptions, does he show that he's still a legit cornerback? How good is that draft class, AJ?
I mean, the Tyler Smith thing really is hard to ignore. And I think how much everybody hated it and how great it turned out to be. I do think there is this reverse hindsight 2020, kind of grading or whatever that happens. I think because, the average person feels like they were so wrong. They're so willing to give the Cowboys credit, and they should. I mean, obviously it was amazing. At the time, the Cowboys obviously had traded Amari. They had not gotten things done with Randy Gregory, and they had, chosen to cut Lyle Collins, and they told us, we're gonna draft the best players available. We're not gonna draft for need. And they went out and took an offensive lineman, a pass rusher, and a wide receiver. And so it just kind of felt, so silly and ridiculous. And to their credit, they kind of pulled it off. I mean, is there luck involved in that? Sure. I think it's fair to expect Tyler Smith to become something great this year, wherever that winds up being, obviously, contingent upon Tyron Smith's health. I don't know how much opportunity there is going to be for Sam Williams, what with Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence and even the Dorrance Armstrong contract, which aged really well. I think if Jalen Tolbert, and that's part of why I love the Brandon Cooks trade, if Jalen Tolbert just becomes like a dude, like a random, just sort of somewhat nice contributor. I mean, the draft class is continuing. It's like a fine wine. That's where they're at. I mean, they deserve a lot of credit, and a lot of people don't like to give it to them, but they really pulled that off. They didn't win the Super Bowl, and that's obviously a high mark, but they look like they know what they're doing in that capacity.
See, how good is this draft class? What's the potential of this draft class to be? How good are they compared to, forget the Dirty Dozen. Dirty Dozen's next level Cowboys draft back in the day. Let's say since 1990, a top 5, top 3, number 1 best overall draft class at the Cowboys. Well, how good could these guys be?
Well, you got Parsons makes them look good as well. That whole scheme helped them. Bland coming in with 5 interceptions, and Smith can play guard, and he came in trimmed down this year on top of it all.
Right.
They're hungry. I think their character is so important. Clark's character coming in, rehab very well, end up getting on the football field. And
that's a guy who's going to have he'll have a full off season this year. He'll have a full off season of practice.
I think these guys, they want to play football, and that's what they're there for, and that's what you see. Smith came back. He is trimmed down, still has the strength. You're not going to lose his strength. Okay. Conditioning, he went to work. He got better automatically. You look at him, trimmed down. Now, again, these guys, the left side of that offensive line, the Smith boys, where he plays, that's the key to this whole year. But since Jason Garrett left, something happened in that draft room since he left.
I think you're starting to see a lot more trust. But to me, Jerry Jones' biggest strength is his greatest weakness is that he listens to people. And I think during certain years, he listened to Jason Garrett, which at times helped. Listen, Jason Garrett's the one who went out and picked Tyron Smith. He was there. That was his guy. But I think a lot of times that also means T.O. is gone. They move on from him because it's Jason Garrett, right? And Steven, don't get me wrong. I think that's Jerry's greatest strength. And that's made him a successful business person. It's made him a successful owner, right? That's Jimmy Johnson comes in. They work together. He listens to Jimmy. They figure out the draft chart, for the trades and everything, and the players he picks. But it also leads to some foolish decisions too. And for years, it got him stuck with guys who just weren't making the right decisions. And he kept Jason Garrett around way too long. But I think now that he has McCarthy, he's got obviously Will McClay. Steven is doing a better job now. I think he's definitely grown into the role of like this. He really is he's the cap guy. I know Cap Boy is thrown around with Steven and Dan Quinn. And now we're going to see with Schottenheimer, like putting the offense together, even though McCarthy would be calling it. I think he's listening to the right people now, for better or for worse. We're going to find out. The proof will be in the pudding. This draft class, to me, I don't know that they can be number 1 in the last 30 plus years. I mean, 2016 has Zeke, Jalen Smith, Malik Collins, Dak Prescott, Anthony Brown. That's a good one. 2005 was, loaded. 2005, you got DeMarcus Ware, Marcus Spears, Kevin Burnett, Marion Barber, Chris Canty, Jay Ratliff, which is insane. That was an insane haul by Parcells. And then you have 91. So you got Russell Maryland, Alvin Harper, you have Kelvin Pritchett, you have Eric Williams, Leon Lett, Larry Brown. Can it be one of those? I don't know. But if it's better than 2016's draft class with Zeke and Jalen Smith and Malik Collins and Dak and Anthony Brown, I would not be upset. Even if it was close to that level, they are a team who is, I think, a Super Bowl contender. And that's my next thing. What is the baseline for the Cowboys this year? What's the point where you go, okay, it wasn't a total disaster? Everyone wants a Super Bowl, don't get me wrong. And I think this is a Super Bowl caliber team. But if you say this team lost in the wild card, it'd be a disaster. This team lost in the divisional round, it'd be a disaster. This team lost. Where do they have to get to for it to not be a disaster? RJ, I'll go to you first.
I mean, people ask this question a lot. They say, if the Cowboys don't reach the title game, should they fire Mike McCarthy? First of all, it's a really difficult thing to do, right? So you're talking, 28 head coaches don't do that every single year. But even then, even if we live in that world, well, how did they miss it? Did they lose in the divisional round off of a weird field goal that bounced off the upright? Did they lose off of a weird call? Did they win off of a weird call to get there? You know what I mean? The context of it all matters. Was the quarterback injured? On the surface, maybe people look and say, oh man, the 49ers lost another NFC championship game last year. What a bunch of losers. It's they were on their 5th quarterback of the season. You know what I mean? There's a lot of context that's necessary. And so, but at the same time, it's a franchise with a storied history and kind of I wrote something a few weeks ago Jimmy Johnson made it to 5 years with the Cowboys. There is only one other head coach that Jerry Jones has employed besides Jimmy, and I think we would all acknowledge that's a bit of an exception, that has made it to 5 years. Because generally speaking, somebody's reached 4 years and moved on for one reason or another. And the only other one is Jason Garrett. I mean, so you're talking about, Mike McCarthy's entering his 4th year. So, I mean, this is kind of it, right? Like generally, dudes get 4 years to be successful or not. And if you strip away the franchise and the history and the expectation and the glitz and the glamour, I mean, the first season was obviously incredibly difficult from a world standpoint, but even within the confines of just the Cowboys, they had an inordinately level of circumstance that they had to kind of run through. I think 2021 was really impressive. I think last year was really impressive. And I think what impresses me, I guess, if you have to develop your own sort of Rorschach test, it's that this is a team that survives and that adapts and that thrives. I mean, I know on our post-game show at Blogging the Boys, after they lost to the Bucs in week 1, we were like, that's it. Season's over. You know what I mean? Like Tyron's hurt, Dak is hurt. Like they're done, because generally speaking, that they have been done. They have not been a team that has been able to survive and to adapt and to adjust and to kind of just crawl through the mud. And I don't give Mike McCarthy all of that credit, but I have to give him an insane amount, because different head coaches, different quarterbacks, different offensive and defensive staffs have not been able to survive those sorts of things. And so, I mean, it does feel like, I guess, to kind of tie a cheesy bow on all this, the culture of things is changing. And so I don't want to throw that out. I mean, I think that getting rid of Mike McCarthy, if they lost in the wild card round, would be the baby with the bathwater. Again, contingent upon whatever hypothetical context that would be involved there. But I think they have to contend. I think they have to compete. But I also think that we have to avoid getting in over our skis, because they're looking to be a playoff team for the 3rd year in a row. They haven't been a playoff team for 3 years in a row since the mid-90s. I mean, so we can sit here and we can, talk about all the, cool pieces of memorabilia in our man caves and things like that. But this is a franchise that for, a generation now has not been able to do this. And so the fact that they're kind of starting to pick up some steam. I mean, we were talking before we started recording about my son. As he starts to walk, I don't just push him. It's like, dude, I mean, take a couple of steps. We'll hold you. We'll stabilize you, things like that. And so I think you have to be patient. It's a difficult thing, but if you're a team that can kind of be in the mix each and every year, the odds are that eventually fate will smile upon you.
And they're not just a team who's getting in at 9-8. They
right.
back-to-back 12-win seasons with Mike McCarthy. After that, D, I'm going to kick it over to you. What's the level you say, okay, hypothetically, if everybody's healthy, they play a game straight up, if you don't get to which round of the playoffs, it's a disaster. If Dak is healthy, if everybody is, relatively healthy, right? We get it that you go late in the season, no one's truly healthy in the NFL. It's like getting in a car crash for 17 weeks, right? So what's the point of no return? You say, I mean, I love what Mike McCarthy has done. I think I've been one of his biggest supporters as much as I can be. Barring a disaster where the team turns on him in mutiny, for you, what's the point of, okay, this season wasn't progressive, this season was a disaster, or at least wasn't a success? How about that? I won't even say disaster. What point you say, okay, this wasn't a successful year? What do they have to get to be a successful season?
Well, listen, I'm going to be blunt. I have to be in the Super Bowl. I have to be in the Super Bowl. To me, everything else, that's but here's what I say to you all the time, Paul, and RJ touched on it. I want to see a tone in that team. You have to have tone. Jimmy Johnson, after that Detroit Lion game in the playoffs, he got destroyed. He went out and drafted well with the corners and came back. And they were supposed to be, the 49er game really in reality was a year early. Nobody thought they were going to beat the 49ers out there. They were all green. They still had some experiences up there in the front line, but when they beat the great 49ers, that turned heads right there. The tone of the team has to turn around, and that's why we have to be in the Super Bowl. That's it. Tone and Super Bowl. You give me not a Super Bowl, but if I see the tone, because this is the 3rd year, Jimmy Johnson's 3rd year, right? Those guys, they have the foundation laid there. It's strange. RJ says the same thing. Paul, we said to say, this seems different in the air. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the Canadian fires or something. I don't know what it is, but it's different this year. But I need to be in the Super Bowl. If I go to work the next day and the Cowboys lose the Super Bowl, I can say to everybody, yeah, we finally got there. You suck. That's all. That's all I can tell you. Yeah.
See, I'm talking about the Cowboys being contenders. You have to be a contender. I think it's time for them to take the next step to get to a conference championship, right? It's been divisional. It's been divisional. It's been this 49ers team who I could, figuratively speaking, choke, hate them. I hate them. I hate them. But they're a good team. They're a phenomenal defense, even if their quarterbacks, they put in random quarterbacks, right? You have to get over that hump. There's no team in the NFC who I'm like, there's no way they can beat them. Eagles, there's not saying there aren't good teams. Eagles are a good team. They have phenomenal talent. The Cowboys have shown they could score on them and they can play with them in Dallas or in Philly, right? They beat Cooper Rush, but the Cowboys beat them with Dak. I'm not saying they are not good. The 49ers, the Cowboys can score 20 points, 22 points in a game. They could have beaten them. The Cowboys defense really shut them down, say for one drive in the second half. I look at across the NFC, there's no one who I'm like, the Giants couldn't beat the Cowboys with Cooper Rush last year in New York early, and they're as vanilla as they come. I'm not scared of anybody. You got to do a regular season. Got to give me a double-digit win season, at least 10, right? 10-7 or better. But you also have to give me that postseason success. I need to get, hypothetically, if everybody's healthy, you got to give me that NFC Championship game. Again, some people go down. We see what happened with Tony Pollard. He went down in the playoffs. So that kind of, yes, we lost to the 49ers. We did lose our most explosive or second most explosive player. So to me, it's NFC Championship, figuratively speaking, or bust. All right. So we're going to start to, not going to close right away, but we're going to start to close up. What's the Cowboys? Give me a Cowboys hot take or something where you're like, I can see this happening. CeeDee Lamb's going to be the number one receiver in the NFL. Give me Tony Pollard. Nothing crazy. I'm not asking for Skip and Shannon here, but give me a take that you say, I see this happening this year for the Cowboys. Good, bad, up, down, left, right, whatever you got.
Parsons, 20 sacks.
20 sacks.
20 sacks. 20.
Okay. RJ, give me a take. Something you're like, I can see this happen this year. This is it for this team. Somebody, good, bad, or indifferent.
I mean, I think that they've done it all those different ways, right? Like they've done it with like the dude who leads the NFL in pick whatever. You know what I mean? They've done it where Dak was the Walter Payton NFL Man of the Year. They've done it where Jason Garrett won Coach of the Year. They've done it with rookies. They've done it with veterans, right? Like, and that's, I think, how we all feel like we're kind of sick of telling the same stories and seeing the same sort of things just kind of split differently, right? Like, we're eating hot dogs, we're eating pork chops, we're eating bacon. Like this is ultimately the same animal. And we want some beef at this point. And so, yeah. I mean, I think it will be ugly. I mean, it's at times. And I think that that's hard to remember. And I know that's vague, but I think, it's easy to look at the schedule and be like, this team stinks, that team stinks. Like, oh, they're going to cruise into December with, 11 wins under their belt. It will be ugly. They will lose a game that they're not supposed to. They will steal one that feels, like they should have lost. I mean, so it will be a lot of coin flips and it will be a battle of attrition. And that's just kind of the way it goes. And so that's my prediction, and in many ways I feel very confident in that because this is a team that has always managed to keep things fresh, albeit painful, but it will be a fight, and I don't say that in like a lame Al Pacino speech in Any Given Sunday sort of way, but like it will be a fight. That's the way it goes. I mean, we all hate the Niners, but I think we all greatly admire them. I mean, they haven't won a Super Bowl, but they've been to 3 of the last 4 title games. And, if you ask some of their fans, they probably feel like that's a failure. I mean, but, we would switch lives with them in a heartbeat. But like the Cowboys, they were the most injury plagued team in 2020. The Cowboys are the second most injury plagued team, and that's why they bounced back so strong now 2 years ago. And so, they just have a culture, they have a way, they have the right nucleus of players, and it feels like the Cowboys are a bit of a carbon copy of that. Not that they have a George Kittle, but just kind of the same from a disposition standpoint. And so that's my prediction, is that you know, there will be times where they win a game because, yeah, Dak throws for 400 yards and has 5 total touchdowns and, you know, is the FedEx Air Player of the Week or whatever it is. And there will be times where Micah Parsons has 4 sacks and a forced fumble and, you know, Donovan Wilson scoops it up and it's an awesome highlight or whatever. But there'll be times where they win on a last-second field goal against a team that we think they're a lot better than, or they lose that way. And so it will be unpredictable. It will be madness. It will be chaos. It will be joy. It will be cathartic. It will be painful. It will be stressful. And hopefully it'll be fun.
Yeah. That's a great point. I like the way you say they'll win ugly, or it won't be a cakewalk, right? It's not going to be what we wish or what we picture in our mind is beautiful 17-0 season where they just run through everybody. And that for me is always the big first mental hurdle for me. It's like, okay, I know what Cowboys loss is going to happen at some point. Last year, week 1, I hated that they lost. I was like, okay, gosh, just get out of my system, done, because I am miserable after the Cowboys' first loss. But I just need to get out of the way.
To that point, though, do you remember what happened in week 2? So because every year people, you know, the framework is always, oh, if you start off 0-2, you know, 93 Cowboys, the first team to ever win the Super Bowl. Do you remember what happened week 2 last year? So they were on the precipice of going 0-2, obviously.
They were playing, was it the Bengals?
They played the Bengals and it was stressful, right? Trayvon had the stop of Jamar Chase that was really epic, and Brett Maher won that game. I mean, so, you know, to kind of go back to Al Pacino, like it is a game of inches, and so you take that inch, and what if that inch goes the other way, right? So now all of a sudden that week it's 0-2 as opposed to 1-1 with Cooper Rush taking one from the reigning AFC champions. Like the margins really are that thin, and you could play that game like a billion different ways. What if Noah Brown doesn't tip the ball in Jacksonville in overtime that gets returned for a touchdown? Then, you know, they're 13-5 or 13-3 or 4, whatever it is, and you know, they make it a bigger race in the NFC. What if Jalen Hurts never gets hurt? Like it's never even a race. Like there are these tiny little moments that ultimately kind of make up the butterfly effect that is an NFL season.
Right. It's a great point. It really is a phenomenal point, and something that you don't often pay attention to, but I think something that's fans realize, but I think you want to stick your head in the sand and be like, no, it's this big picture thing. It's McCarthy sucks. It's Dak's no good, or it's CD's the best receiver in the NFC. We want to paint these broad strokes as what it is, rather than see that football's a nuanced game. It's incredibly complex. It's incredibly fast. You have science, you have sports science, you have technology, all these incredible things happening in a tornado all at once. And I think that's the beauty of football. That is this modern gladiatorial game where the body is pushed to the limits against another person's will. And it's not just brute force, it's also the brain. It's also understanding. That's why guys like Ray Lewis are incredible, or Ed Reed, because it's not just their physical dominance, it's also the mental ability to dominate a game like a Peyton Manning or something like that. And it is moments, or just, I mean, I think back to the Broncos Panthers Super Bowl, and the Panthers that early on, that first like drive fumble. And
when Cam doesn't fall on it, he just stands there. Yeah,
he stands there, and me and my dad we looked right at each other. We said, "Game's over." Right? If he dives on and gets the ball back, maybe it's a different game. You know, I still think the Broncos win, but it wasn't even a contest. But it's a moment here or there that, who knows if the Eagles win their Super Bowl if Carson Wentz doesn't get hurt. You know what I mean? Like there's so many different things that I think it's fun to look back at and say, wow, it really was just moments, or just a little bit here or there. But that's also like the elixir of hope, right? That you're like, it's just a little bit. We're not that far away.
No, to your point, I think people only want to, you know, play hindsight with the things that they didn't like, with the results they didn't like. So they want to go back and say, well, if all the bad breaks we got are different, then it will work out. It's like, well, regression doesn't work out that way. Regression is regression, right? Like, however it ultimately is sliced out. I mean, like if you go back 2 years, right? Like because like I think in our heads we're like, oh well, in 2021 they won the division, right? So like, you know, they just kind of get back to that. Well, they beat the Chargers on a last second field goal, right? They beat the Patriots on a walk-off touchdown. They almost lost that game after the Trayvon Diggs pick 6 with the big touchdown that happened. They beat the Vikings without Dak on a last second touchdown from Cooper Rush to Amari Cooper, right? So like right there, I mean, that's 3 games right there. We talked about 2 games last year. You're talking about about a team that has won 24 regular season games over the last 2 years, and we can very easily, just with a sleight of a hand, adjust 5 of them. And then our expectations are very different entering 2023 because, the game played with an oblong shaped ball made of leather went one way instead of the one we liked.
Yeah, I think and part of that though is the sign of a good team. Sometimes those close games go your way because you have good players doing good things or putting themselves in a position to do good things. They put themselves in the place, right? It was DiMaggio that says like good luck, right? Basically, I forget the exact quote. It's like good luck basically just happens because of hard work.
Yeah, you better be lucky than good.
Better be lucky than good, right? Sometimes those things happen and you put them both together and that's the way it goes. I'm going to end with one. I want to give us each one last chance to say whatever you want to say about the Cowboys this year. I'm going to start by saying this. I know for a fact we're all going to agree on this. It is a travesty and a sham that Jimmy Johnson is not in the Ring of Honor. It is disgraceful and it is small of Jerry Jones. And I'm going to say it every single podcast until he gets put in. It's disgusting. Put him in, Jerry. Get over yourself. Do what you got to do. And it was more disgraceful that he said he was going to put him in during Jimmy's Hall of Fame speech to kind of take his acceptance to kind of like take the shine off of Jimmy and then not to do it. It's disgusting. To me, it's Jerry Jones' worst move, worse than firing Landry because he made a Hall of Fame choice in Jimmy Johnson. It's his worst decision. I could rant about this for 20 minutes. It's a dumb move. Put him in the Ring of Honor. Do what you're supposed to do. I'm done. D, give me one thing about Cowboys you want to say.
The Jimmy Johnson thing, it bothers me to the max. It really does. It bothers me. I'm a lifelong Cowboy fan. I've cried more over the Cowboys than anything there is. Since a little boy growing up in Hartford, he has to get over it. He has to do it for the fans. There's millions of us. All of us feel this way. You have to put Johnson in, but we can't get to Jerry. I don't know how to get to Jerry. I mean, I know how to indirectly, but it's an ego thing. Unfortunately, ego destroyed that organization and it's hindering. He's earned that. You won together. And unfortunately, I wasn't going to bring it up. I'm telling you, I wish I could do something to change his mind. I can speak to one person, but it's not going to change it. He's not going to get there as long as Mr. Jones is alive. He's not getting in there. And that's the truth of it. He's not. And that's what really sucks. It really does. There you go.
There you go.
I think my thought on the Jimmy thing quickly is, obviously, I think Jimmy deserves it. And I would love to see Jimmy kind of get to enjoy it. But there are so many people that would enjoy it, and beyond the obvious, right? I would love to see Troy Aikman and Michael Irvin and Emmitt Smith enjoy it, and Moose Johnston, and all these people connected to the team. I would love to see my dad enjoy it. I would love to see all these people who have these memories, who have these tears, who have these these legacies or whatever, these memories tied to that team. That's something that I think everybody deserves, and it's unfortunate and it's frustrating. My one thing is I've done this professionally for a while now, and I've obviously, let the Cowboys affect my mood for most of my life. And
tell me about it.
I've convinced, I'm a romantic at heart, and I've convinced myself so many times that it has to be the year for this. It had to be the year my senior year of high school. It had to be the year that I got engaged. It had to be the year my son was born, right? Like that, the romance of life was going to work out that of course, finally, this is what the football universe was waiting for this event to happen in my life, for these two things to be intrinsically connected like that. And not in a defeatist way, but I'm kind of done with that. I'm kind of just, and that's what the McCarthy era has kind of taught me is just trust them. Like I'm at a place where I'm willing to trust them, and maybe that's naivete. Maybe I'm falling for it all over again. But I'm just kind of done trying to will it into existence. I believe it can happen. I know the odds associated with it. I know the logic of life and of humanity and those tentacles of all this, but I'm willing to kind of just sit back and watch, as opposed to thinking that I like to have a lot of fun on Twitter with coincidences and things like that, and I'll never stop that. But I'm done trying to pretend that it's happening. I'm done trying to make it my Super Bowl. I'm ready to just kind of let it be theirs and just hopefully be along for the ride.
That's fair. That's why. Listen,
I couldn't say it any better.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think we're all ready to be along for the ride. You should have been in the the Cortez household during the 2010s or aughts or whatever they were. Because man, Cowboys losses there were, you might as well have just like, I don't know, just whatever, crime against humanity. That's how we took it. It was awful. It was awful times on Monday mornings or Sunday evenings, and the Cowboys would lose, or the week after a Cowboys playoff loss or whatever. It was not fun for us. So we get it, and it's been a tough, it's really been an emotional journey and I think you might understand this. Once you have a kid, you understand there's different things, and I don't want a Cowboys loss to affect me with my son or my sons either. As much as I might be upset or pissed off or whatever, it's like, okay, but I still have a son who's like, hey, dad. It's like, all right, we're fine, we're okay.
Yeah, I think for me, it's amazing thinking of I wasn't an infant obviously when I began being so emotionally tied to the team, but it's like so much time has passed that like I measure my life in like impactful Cowboys moments, right? Like, oh, like, well, we took this trip when like they signed that player, like, we were here when this happened or that happened, or, this game or that game, whatever. So like, my life operates in Cowboys time. And so you're right. Like now to have a son, and it's like he was born the night before they lost to the Raiders on Thanksgiving 2 years ago. And so, that's just that's just the way life goes. And I'm really happy about that. And I'm really blessed. And I'm really fortunate that my wife likes to make it a part of all of our lives. But it's a unique thing. And I mean, look, I wouldn't trade it. I wouldn't trade all of this pain and heartache and frustration and all the arguments and debates I've had with Cowboys fans or, family or friends or whoever. I wouldn't trade it because I'm a romantic. At some point, it will be worth it. At some point, the 90s jokes and everything, they will end and they will die. And people will have to come up with new material, and I will sleep a lot better that particular night.
As Red Sox fans, we understand. 2004, like it doesn't matter what the Yankees do ever again, because we lived through 2004, and we live in Southern Connecticut, and there's a slew. I mean, it's Yankees country here, so I mean, I'm sure you understand as an Astros fan, a hatred of the Yankees. But like, man, being down 0-3 and going to high school when you're like a sophomore in high school and hearing it all 0-4, oh my gosh, Red Sox are going to choke again. You live through those moments, and now I can go back and watch 4 Nights in October on ESPN. It's these moments you live with, but that's the beauty of sport, right? That's why. Don't
let us wear one.
To it, you can't.
Don't let us win one.
Yeah, I will end with this. And I don't know y'all's thoughts on the Astros. I know Yankees fans' thoughts. But where I'm obviously grateful for my Astros fandom, but I'm forever, ever grateful that they gave me a title against the city of Philadelphia. Like the Cowboys can't do that. You know what I mean? As much as they, right. This is not not in the cards. It's not possible. So like to have a title that came at their expense is a really savory thing. And that it happened when, I remember obviously when the Astros won the World Series a few months back now, so many Eagles fans like, well, that's okay. It's cool because we're going to win the Super Bowl. And so that didn't happen. It was just an incredible run. And it's a memory that stands out above the rest. I'll say that.
I don't eat Philadelphia cream cheese.
That's noble.
Listen, we're going to end just with one quick thing. Give a shout out to one person or whoever before we go. That's how we like to end. D, who are you shouting out today?
Who am I shouting? Let me see if a friend of mine, Mike Pabilski, who went out the other night. We hung out with an old teacher friend of mine. Mike is up around the corner. He's a big 49er fan. We'll be watching football together. We'll be out watching the Cowboys regular season against the 49ers. So Mike Pabilski, one of my best friends growing up.
RJ, you got a shout out to anybody here tonight before we get off the air?
I'm going to shout out Kyle Tucker of the Houston Astros because he just hit a 3-run home run behind you guys, like the way my computer set up. So thank you to Kyle Tucker.
I respect that. I'm going to shout out buddy Walter Morton. He is running for mayor of Hampden, Connecticut. great guy, Cowboys fan, definitely worth voting for if you're in the city of Hampton. And that's it. Listen, everybody, we appreciate you listening or watching on YouTube or wherever you intake our Cowboys and Coffee podcast. RJ, thank you so much again for coming
Thank you.
out. We
Appreciate
always
it.
appreciate this as your second year in a row. Thank you.
No, thanks so much for having me, guys. Anytime.
Remember, we're a designated report joint. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple iTunes, however you can take in your podcast. We are there. God bless you, everybody. Go Cowboys. Go drink some coffee.